You're listening to BioTalk with Rich Bendis, the only podcast focused on the biohealth capital region. Each episode, we'll talk to leaders in the industry to break down the biggest topics happening today in biohealth.
Hi, this is Rich Bendis, and I'm your host for BioTalk, also the CEO for Biohealth Innovation. And I think we might have our first guest today from the state of Texas. We have Amy Hay, who is the Chief Business Officer for CTMC. And I had to learn what CTMC was as well as the listeners. So it's the Cell Therapy Manufacturing Center, which is a joint venture between Resilience and MD Anderson Cancer Center in Houston. And Amy's going to explain to us later what that all means. But our guest today, Amy Hay, welcome to BioTalk.
Thank you, Rich. I appreciate being here and spending some time with you. And I am, as you said, coming from Texas. So right here in the Texas Medical Center is our manufacturing facility where we manufacture cell and gene therapies.
Excellent. So we're going to learn a lot more about that because you might have some people listening that may need your services. But before we start with that, Amy, I think people would like to learn about you. Talk a little bit about how you evolved to where you got to this position with CTMC and why in the life sciences and the cell therapy space.
Yes, it's an interesting journey. I started my work life and my first position was at MD Anderson Cancer Center. I took an entry-level position and learned the hospital, and this led me to getting a business administration and healthcare master's degree. And as I worked at Anderson, I really became very enamored with the concept of doing well while you're doing good, meaning having an impact on people and on their health and well-being at a time when it is most crucial and they're most vulnerable. I stayed at MD Anderson for about 20 years, which I am very proud of. I call it my first career. And I ran radiation oncology. I had the opportunity to build and operate the Proton Therapy Center in Houston. And then ultimately, my past 10 years at Anderson was the Senior Vice President for Business Development, operating the MD Anderson Cancer Network. So setting up cancer centers that were affiliated with Anderson, both across the United States, like Banner and Cooper and Scripps, and also internationally, places like Albert Einstein in Brazil, American Hospital in Istanbul, and Concord in China. And it was a wonderful way to not only appreciate the depth of research and science at Anderson, but then also try to leverage it and democratize it on a global scale, really reaching patients that perhaps didn't have access to MD Anderson here in Houston. When I left MD Anderson, I actually took a little turn in the road. I decided that I wanted to develop a consulting firm, which I named Evolve, because I felt like I was evolving. I was moving from being in academic medicine on the business side to really wanting to see how I could combine that with entrepreneurs, startups, pharma, data. So I opened up a small boutique consulting firm with a myriad of clients spanning those different industries, and was very successful in trying to identify solutions to providers' problems across pharma, biotech, data, really anywhere out there that we could bring the right people together in order to identify opportunities and innovation. I ended up actually selling Evolve in 2020 to Varian Medical Systems. They're the leader med tech provider of Linacs in a field of radiation oncology. Right about the time I came, they were purchased by Siemens Healthineers. I was the Senior Vice President for Business Development, Strategy, and their ventures portfolio. And it was an interesting time because I really used it to focus my skills on med tech, starting with diagnostics through Siemens Healthineers, and also across treatment with linear accelerators and building out a whole cancer profile for Varian. And I stayed there for about 4 years. But during that tenure, I had the opportunity to work on the development of a precision medicine strategy for a hospital in Brazil, Hospital Israelita Albert Einstein in São Paulo. And through that, we identified the need for them to build up their cell therapy organization and really plan for the future. And as I was looking across leadership in the industry, I identified CTMC as a leader that was not only very versed in academic and also in science and innovation, but had the other side of the equation in that they were nimble, they were able to provide end-to-end services, and they had a business model that reflected that. So as I negotiated for Albert Einstein to develop a partnership with CTMC, I quickly realized that the business model really spoke to me, and the opportunities in cell therapy were so important for the future of not only cancer, but many diseases around the world. So I joined as the Chief Business Officer at CTMC in January of this year. And in the last 5 months or so have been off and running, really focusing on our growth, both from a manufacturing perspective, but also from a global impact perspective.
Quite a background, Amy. An interesting journey, but there was also this boomerang effect that you just couldn't get to leave MD Anderson and had to come back, huh?
Exactly. It's almost as if I've come full circle. I've focused on academics and academic hospitals. Then I really learned the acute care, community care into understanding med tech and now biotech. So hopefully this journey will continue to evolve as I move forward.
Now, you mentioned CTMC a little bit, but really not in depth. And why don't you tell us a little bit about the history, when it was formed, why it was formed, where it's evolved to today? Has its mission changed at all? And then really what you see as the business model for CTMC and what you're going to bring to that.
Happy to. The story of CTMC is actually very interesting in that, like many academic cancer centers, they have such depth and discovery and research and innovation, but they also oftentimes have difficulty moving quickly and being nimble and being flexible just based on their academic rigor. So the initial concept of CTMC started at MD Anderson, actually in-house. And the question was, can we in-house turn our cell therapy manufacturing into a commercial grade? Can we become like industry? And the more and more they focused on it, the more they saw the advantage of spinning out CTMC into a joint venture. So in 2022, they developed a joint venture between Resilience Labs and MD Anderson. It's a 50-50 joint venture. And really, that is when we started our standalone journey. What I will tell you is that in the very beginning days of CTMC, the majority of our customers, we call them co-development partners, were from MD Anderson. They were MD Anderson researchers wanting to get out of the lab and into more of an industrial environment. Fast forward to today, while we still continue to support MD Anderson, we are about 2/3, if not more, biotech startups, and those progressing through the process of either obtaining an IND or getting to pivotal trials. So the growth of the business has been exponential. And by year 3, the facility broke even and has since that time been able to continue to provide what we feel like is a accelerated schedule and also really aligned business model with our partners. And Rich, I use our partners. I actually hate using that word a bit because we don't operate like your traditional CDMO. We really see our customers as our partners, as our co-development team, where together we can accelerate their timelines and get them to clinical proof of concept as quickly as possible. Oftentimes you hear statements on other podcasts or on radio about it takes $100 million to get to clinical proof of concept in cell therapy. And I think CTMC has proven that's not true. We've got to figure out more and more business models that will get us to clinical proof of concept faster and cheaper in order to evolve some of these promising therapies. And that's something that we take very seriously here at CTMC in working with our partners and aligning our incentives together. So we're all looking for the same goal.
Before we dive more deeply into the services of CTMC, talk a little bit about Resilience Labs and why they're the ideal partner and what is their background and why it was such a natural JV for you two to come together.
That's an excellent question. So Resilience Labs across the United States operates many, many manufacturing centers. They brought to the table that approach of efficiency, industry standards, and really a much more evolved digital quality infrastructure. So one of the things that is very important to us here at CTMC is that we have developed a fully digital infrastructure end to end for our manufacturing process. And this just brings a level not only of certainty, but also a level of quality that is very difficult to accomplish when you have disparate systems and you have the potential for human error. So we've eliminated that. And resilience really was the power behind allowing us to become fully digital.
Excellent. Sounds like a great partnership. And you mentioned you have about a third of your clients or partners that come out of MD Anderson and about 2/3 outside. If I'm a small bio company, tell me, why do I come to you and what do you do for me?
Great question. And I do believe that this is the early development stage is kind of our secret sauce, because these are the young companies that are so promising and almost always are challenged on their financials. They never have enough money. They never have enough time. And in that situation, we are an ideal partner in that we provide our partners with full end-to-end services. So if you come to CTMC and you're a small company, we can provide you not only your manufacturing that you came for, but also we can provide regulatory support to get you to your IND and past. We can provide you end-to-end logistics, and we can also provide you an entryway into MD Anderson to get your drug into clinic quickly. And as most people know, that can take quite a bit of time. Because we are 50% part of Anderson and very involved with them, we can get a drug into clinical trials and operating in under 100 days. So we really are able to expedite that. And I have a great example, Rich, in that we have a company that I really think is a shooting star who we started with about a year ago, and the company had 5 people. And their premise was, if we use CTMC for everything else and we focus on our technology, then we will achieve our goals faster. And that's proven out. They're currently out in the market and they're raising $80 million. And their company has 5 people. So that's the value equation for these early startups.
Yeah, most of the startups don't have the financial resources to build the overhead internally. And in order to bring that in, as well as the manufacturing infrastructure, is prohibitive for most companies. So is your geographical reach primarily in the Houston Metroplex area, or do you take companies or clients or partners from all around the United States?
All around the United States. And actually, we're starting soon some international as well. So while we very much believe in point of care or being adjacent to the clinic, we accomplish that through doing clinical trials at MD Anderson, but we also can support multi-center trials all over the United States.
And basically, are you 100% focused on cell therapy, or will you work in other areas?
Our original mandate was really specific to oncology, cell therapies. And while we have the ability to go into other directions like autoimmune or even mental health, there's a lot of promising work being done in neuroscience area, but we focus on oncology today. Primarily, we are manufacturing CAR T and TIL therapies.
Excellent. Because of the tie to MD Anderson, which is one of the leading cancer centers in the world, it makes sense to focus on oncology.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, so right now, there's very few areas within life sciences, biotech, that are getting a lot of attention and, as a matter of fact, a lot of investment. And CAR T cell therapy appears to be one of those, and precision medicine in the relationship. So talk a little bit about what you see in the whole cell therapy industry today, what's happening from a disruption standpoint, where are the biggest opportunities, because you see a number of these firms coming into CTMC.
Yes. And what I have been referring to the environment right now as really an uncertain disruption, because things are very much disrupted. As we all know, concerns over everything from staffing at the FDA to tariffs to recent, negative players in the field getting out have tainted a bit cell therapy and gene therapy. We all thought this was going to be a year of really uptake, and I'm not quite sure that that's what's happening. I think that there is this continued fear of how do we appropriately and expeditiously get these through the FDA in light of massive cuts and, quite frankly, some of the thought leaders no longer being there. And as well as really looking closely at the tariffs and the implications of that. As I know you're aware and your listeners are as well, 70 to 80% of the ingredients to most drugs come from outside the United States, and 40% of our drugs completely come from outside of the United States. So for a manufacturer, I think about the cost of tubes and the cost of pipettes and all of these things that we get from China and India is going to have an overall impact on the final product and the pricing of that final product. So I do think this period of disruption is making the market a little bit uncertain, and uncertainty is the enemy of biotech.
But uncertainty also represents opportunity.
Absolutely. And my mantra continues to be never let a good crisis go to waste.
That's right. So in these times of crisis, and you're working with a lot of these early stage biotech companies that don't need crisis, they need stability. What are you doing to recommend to them, or how can CTMC provide a little bit of that stability to them that they otherwise wouldn't have access to if they were going independently?
The first thing that I think CTMC does an excellent job in is providing our customers that end-to-end access to everything from expertise, advice, materials, logistics, regulatory support. And so by getting all of those things from CTMC, you are able to really decrease your operational cost. You don't need to go hire an expensive regulatory expert. We have that in-house. You don't need to hire someone to manage your logistics through your CDMO and to the clinic. We do that for you. So really trying to streamline both the process, the procedures, and the manufacturing side. So I think that would be number one. The second would really be the cost to get to clinical proof of concept and the time. We can accelerate that into the clinic. That's saving you time and dollars to get to that proof of concept. And I think that the opportunity here is really to look at how we can utilize innovation in the future across the manufacturing and the discovery process in order to save time and money. I mean, the more that we can reduce that time, reduce human interaction, and automate it, ultimately results in reducing risk, which means taking more of that uncertainty out and putting it on the backs of CTMC while our biotech partners focus on the science and the delivery.
We're talking to Amy Hay, the Chief Business Officer of CTMC in Houston. And Amy, you get to see a lot of disruptive things coming to CTMC. A question that would be interesting would be, do you ever see any that the CTMC or Anderson Medical Center or a ventures division or something would have an interest in taking an equity interest in or partnering with, other than just providing services to them? And how would that work, and what would that look like if that actually occurred?
Yeah, it's a great question. And actually, that's something I'm glad you reminded me of. It's also something that sets CTMC apart from your traditional CDMOs. So when I think about business models and how to align goals with our partners, equity is a piece of that. We have the flexibility to not just think in a fee-for-service manner. We really think about milestones, bonus payments for big stretch goals, and then equity as another form of payment to help get our clients to that proof of concept and beyond. So I think the equity component is going to long-term be something that all manufacturers are going to have to kind of get their head around a bit. As funds are not available, that's one way you can really align interest and create value both for the biotech and for their partner as well.
And with all the preclinical services you're providing, you're getting them ready to try to get go-to-market strategies. What does CTMC do when it comes down to their commercialization needs?
When it comes to the commercialization needs, I will tell you, as of right now, we provide services from early development, even before clinical proof of concept, clinical candidate selection, even all the way through pivotal trials. Right now, today, we are not providing commercialization services, but that is something that is on our strategic roadmap and something that we feel is important in order to long-term be scalable. So when you look at the tech transfer process at other CDMOs and also the complexity of these therapies, anytime you can remain in-house and stay with the same expert staff and process and procedures, that's reducing your risk. So we have set ourselves up in our current footprint to be able to take our customers all the way through pivotal trials. And in the future, we hope to provide manufacturing capabilities for commercialization.
Excellent. Now, CDMOs is not a new industry. It's been around for quite a while. So I'm sure you have a lot of competition. So when you're trying to promote CTMC, what do you look at as the major differential advantages that sets you apart from a lot of the other competitors within the industry?
That's a great question, and it's one that we talk about a lot. In fact, we often say we're the anti-CDMO because our approach is to align incentives with our customers. So we do not really operate in a fashion where it's fee for service. We prefer to operate in kind of a bundled fashion where we tie payment to quarters or to milestones, but not just a fee for service approach. Because we feel like by doing that, we're aligning everyone's incentives. We all are incentivized to work in an expert fashion and an accelerated fashion and get things to clinic. That would probably be the first item. The second item would absolutely be our end-to-end services. Typically speaking, your traditional CDMO, and while I will admit I'm seeing some of this change out there, but your typical CDMOs, they leave the logistics to you. And as a small early stage biotech, that's a lot of logistics. And you have to hire people and hire middleman in order to make that happen. We do that all in-house. It's one package, if you will. So between those two elements, there's a clear reduction, typically in cost and reduction in time, as well as the fact that because we are part of MD Anderson as a 50% owner, our background, our pedigree comes from MD Anderson. Many of our staff were researchers and still are at Anderson. So we're not just manufacturing, we're co-developing. One of the areas that is of, I think, greatest potential impact in the future is the area of TIL therapy for solid tumors. And TIL therapy is really, I would say, one of our sweet spots, if you will. We have a considerable amount of experts on our staff who have decades of work with TIL therapy. And in addition to that, because we are lucky enough to have these researchers and innovators under our roof, they're constantly developing new proprietary reagents and other methods in order to optimize TIL therapy and make it more scalable and viable.
And for the listeners who don't know what TIL therapy is, could you explain that for them?
Yes, TIL, tumor infiltrating lymphocytes. This is another type of immunotherapy, much like CAR T that many people have heard of. CAR T stands for chimeric antigen receptor T cell therapy. And both of these are immunotherapies that use the patient's own immune cells to fight their cancer. They are different in how they are sourced and engineered. So with CAR T, we take a patient's cells from their blood and we extract those and then we engineer them to go back and find and attack the tumor. Versus these cells we take directly from the tumor. After we expand them, then we reinfuse them into the patient. Because they came from that tumor, they go directly to the tumor and they understand the proteins on that tumor. So they're able to attack the cancer cells and leave the healthy remaining tissue alone. So we see a huge opportunity with TIL and solid tumor cancers.
Well, your background in proton therapy didn't hurt.
Yes, yes. It's interesting in that one of the things I think as an industry we need to do better at is educating the public about cell therapies. And I was at ISCT last week, and there was a panel discussion around this, how we perhaps done ourselves a disservice because we tend to talk very internally in the science community. So when we talk externally, there's not a lot of understanding of what cell therapy is and what it is not, even from a perspective of challenges that arise with payers who don't see this different than a bone marrow transplant or than a replacement of an organ. But it's very different. So the whole essence of cell therapy is harnessing the power of your immune system and those cells to attack that cancer, to literally use you as part of the supply chain in order to attack the cancer in your body. So it has its own manufacturing challenges because of that. Adjacency to the patient is critical because the patient is part of your supply chain.
Got it. But basically, you deal with cell therapy almost every day. So you're getting to see what disruptions occurring and where the next wave of innovation may be coming. So what do you see as the future waves of innovation that's going to be around the cell therapy field?
And that's when the conversation gets interesting. Obviously, no crystal ball in my lap today, but I really do believe that we're going to see more and more gene editing and synthetic biology. The gene editing really allows a less toxic environment for those cells and also better control. So we're seeing more and more, both CAR T and TIL biotech companies that are adding in a gene editing component in order to really hone in on decreasing the toxicity, which we know is a significant issue using these cell therapies. I'd say the next area that I think is very interesting, but exceedingly complicated and hasn't quite proven out yet, is the whole concept of off-the-shelf allogeneic therapies. And will we actually be able to accomplish this? And what that means is that with off the shelf, you're gene editing these cells to really knock out the cancer and also to recognize the immune system. With allogenic, that further means that you could have a universal donor. So instead of those cells coming from your body, you could have a universal donor, and through editing, we could mass produce cell therapies. Now, that's very much in the future. There's a lot of really smart scientists around the world working on that. But that is something that I think we will see eventually. I think on the manufacturing side, we're going to see some innovations in the short term. We're already seeing a lot of closed systems. So when you think about the bioreactors that we utilize in order to culture the cells and expand the cells, the less interaction with a human that you have, the better, right? You reduce the risk and you allow those cells maximum potential to grow. And so as more and more closed bioreactors start coming to market, I think that's going to be a short-term innovation. And I think the other short-term innovation out there right now is the use of AI and predictive analytics, harnessing that in order to not only design optimal constructs for CAR Ts and TILs, but also really getting down to predictive responses, being able to model cell behavior, and quite frankly, having real-time dynamic information about the patient and what we expect will happen post-therapy.
Well, I think that's probably one of the major benefits of being affiliated with MD Anderson, because you can see a lot of this innovation and research going on right there in your own facility.
Exactly. And one of the areas that MD Anderson researchers are looking at, but many exceptional researchers around the world are looking at, that I think is another short-term innovation, is digital biomarkers. I think that in the short term, I would give it less than 5 years, we're going to see a lot more in the digital biomarker space. And really what that means is that instead of a traditional scan, blood work or saliva, testing that and giving a report, we can actually use sensors and apps and wearables to continuously get data from you as the patient and be able to manage your health or any recurrence or problems that you have. So just think about the impact that could have on almost daily life of a cancer patient. If instead of having to schedule and go in every 3 months for a scan, their doctor was consistently watching their body react and predicting what was going to happen. So a lot of excitement in that space. And I think a space that we're going to see a push for continuing to include real world data in clinical trial structures.
And then with all these new innovations, one of the biggest things that all investors or people involved in commercialization ask is who's going to pay for it. So talk a little bit about what you see in the reimbursement world.
That is unfortunately often the first question that you get. And it is an imperfect system, but it is one that we have today to operate within. We are seeing approvals for obviously CAR-T's made a great start. Last year, TIL approval for Iovance and solid tumors, another good precedent set. I think we're going to see a lot of followers in those areas, specifically with TIL and melanoma. We're going to see people bringing commercialized product based on Iovance's acceptance. But I do think part of our job as leaders in this field is to continue to educate and work with the government, the FDA, in order to really prove that value proposition, the total cost of ownership. And if you think about that total cost of ownership of you as a cancer patient, a one-time treatment that eliminates your cancer and places you in remission is, yes, an expensive endeavor. But if you compare that to longitudinal data and having surgery and chemotherapy and scans and we need to do a better job proving that there is cost efficiency in one-time treatments.
This is maybe a little off the cuff, but how do you see this current administration in its response to innovation, oncology research, and all of the areas where you're focused today?
It's going to be an interesting ride the next few years. Unfortunately, I think that we took a step backwards in cell and gene therapy by the cuts in the FDA and some of the personnel that left. I think the appetite for expensive therapies is low right now. And if you look at what's going on with the most favored nation pricing concepts that were just talked about on Monday by the president, all of these things are going to have a reciprocal effect. It's kind of the old cause and effect, right? So if we put tariffs on drugs and if we continue to look at most favored nation status on drug pricing, these things are going to be difficult for the cell therapy community to tolerate. They're already expensive drugs. Either having them more expensive or not being able to reimburse properly will stifle that innovation. So we have a road ahead of us, which to me says that we absolutely need to start focusing on the use of predictive analytics, AI, and we also need to start developing papers and tracking patients so we can prove the value over time of cell therapy.
Patience, persistence, and education, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
In that order.
Yeah. One of the other things that might be obvious to me, but you talk about end-to-end services that you provide through CTMC. Do you actually do any actual incubation or acceleration of some of these early stage companies by co-locating with you in your facilities?
No, that's a great question. We actually do not, but what I would offer instead is because we are lucky enough to be seated in the Texas Medical Center, we partner. So we partnered with the Texas Medical Center. They have a large, what they call Helix Park, that is full of innovators and scientists. We do a lot of work with them. We also work with the Texas Medical Center Innovation Hub. And they actually have entrepreneurs in residence, and they have cohorts of teams yearly that we mentor, interact with, and really try to cultivate that space. And I have actually an excellent example. There is a company by the name of March Bio who is really doing some incredible work. They were incubated at the TMC hub. We interacted with them, and we've been their partner on developing, and they're in the clinic and showing some incredible opportunities for the future. So I do think we have some examples of where we really worked closely with this ecosystem in Houston to try to support these early stage companies.
Yeah, it's a very vibrant and pretty comprehensive ecosystem, and it's just trying to get all of the parts to communicate with one another, right?
Yes, that's the complexity. And although MD Anderson is a partial owner of CTMC, we work across the medical center because we see our goal as agnostic. We want to work with any promising researcher who's focused on cell therapy.
Amy, this has been a very great introduction to CTMC, which is the Cell Therapy Manufacturing Center, a joint venture between Resilience and MD Anderson Cancer Center. And what is it that we haven't told the listeners that you'd like to tell them that we haven't discussed?
Thank you again, Rich, for having me. It's been my pleasure. We probably could talk for hours, or at least I could. One of the things that we really haven't talked about is the issue of access for cell therapy. Because these are such promising, innovative therapies, I feel we have an obligation to really ensure that we're thinking through how we can increase access on a global scale. One of the things that I've been standing up since I arrived at CTMC is the development of a global alliance network, where we partner with facilities all over the world to not only teach them and share our knowledge, but also to really try to regionalize manufacturing. The closer to the patient, the better outcome, if you will, from a manufacturing chain of custody, reliability, scalability standpoint. So CTMC is very much trying to aggregate leaders across the globe in cell therapy and really provide and push to have access for all, if you will. So I think that would be kind of a parting comment. Here at CTMC, we really focus on the patient and how do we get things to the patient as fast as possible with the best possible outcome. And if we get up every day and that's our focus and our goal, then I want to believe that through innovation and through planning and persistence, we will democratize cell therapy around the world.
It's great vision. And you've got a good background to lead as the Chief Business Officer for CTMC. And we've been talking to Amy Hay, and I've been educated as well because I think there's a number of companies in the biohealth capital region where we reside, Maryland, DC, and Virginia, that might be able to take advantage of some of your services down there. So if people want to get a hold of you or learn more about CMTC, how are they going to do that, Amy?
Yes, please reach out to me directly. As you can tell, I'm perfectly happy to get on the phone and have a chat and talk about the industry and how we can help support innovators and researchers in cell therapy. You can visit us at ctmc.com. And my personal email is hay@ctmc.com.
Very simple.
The benefit of having a short name comes in easy to remember.
Very good, Amy. And we've enjoyed having you on BioTalk today. This has been Amy Hay, Chief Business Officer, CTMC. And this probably won't be the last time we talk to you as you continue your journey in getting more access to people around the services CTMC provides.
Great. Thank you, Rich, and have a lovely day.
Thanks for listening to BioTalk with Rich Bendis.